Thank you very much all for joining us, and thank you for those who watch this at the recording that we will upload on our YouTube channel later. I want to welcome everybody to this Learning Bite workshop. We hold Learning Bites almost every month here at the Sophia, and the goal is to give everyone bite-sized knowledge, techniques, best practices, things that they can get to their classrooms tomorrow morning. Today, we have with us Scott Hebert from Canada, who has some very, very interesting approaches to gamification. This is what he will speak to us today, and he will share with us his new initiative, his new platform called the Gamification Guy. But I'm giving the floor to Scott to speak to us about this initiative and his work, and get right into the content of today's workshop. Thank you very much for joining.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to do this. I love talking gamification. And so because I have a half an hour, because I actually have to get to work here very shortly, because it is 7 a.m. here in Canada, I'm going to focus on one principal idea of gamification, which is, well, I guess two principles really: human motivation in the gamification factor, as well as the different types of players. Then I'm going to kind of show you how you can utilize that towards creating activities, kind of show you how I'll give you the contents of one, and then I'll kind of introduce a platform I've created, which is a fully gamified professional development platform to learn kind of from the absolute basics of gamification all the way to the more defined and complex, if you're really interested in diving right into it. So without any further ado here, I'll kind of jump right in. So what I normally would present here would take me about 2.5 hours, because there is a lot of different things to explain in that I do, but I'll kind of give you like an incredibly quick rundown about what we're going to get to. So when I started gamification, it became with this quote, which is the idea that kids right now aren't naturally engaged with school because they live in a completely different society and world than many of us did. The technology, the instant gratification, the ability to kind of swipe and change whatever's in front of you to what you like and prefer. And so I kind of realized, we have to meet kids where they are. It's not their fault that they live in this kind of timeline that they're living in. And so I did some talking with kids, and I've seen grade increases and boosts and quotes and all these types of things. But I really like this quote, and I still remember it from university, that if we teach today as we taught yesterday, we rob students or children of tomorrow. And so when I started my career, I started in elementary education, and I saw kids who loved school. And then I switched over to middle school, and I saw kids who really were bored with school. And so I wanted to see if we could figure out a way to recapture that imagination and excitement of school that you see when kids are really, really young. And so I'm not famous or anything, so I get to quote myself, which is always fun. And so I just really think that education is a system in crisis. It's an engagement crisis. That's what it is. Kids are bored. Kids need different ways to connect to material, and therefore gamification was kind of the answer. So in this normal presentation, I'd go through some comparisons, some resources, what school does, how I got to gamification. But I want to be really clear about what gamification is. So gamification is using game design elements in non-traditional settings. And what this means is it's not simply giving kids points or giving kids, a leaderboard or something to that effect, which we call PBLs, okay, points, badges, and leaderboards. What it is it's a fully immersive experience with narrative and characters and story, ethics, item cards, currency, the whole bit. It's a fully immersive experience that kids kind of become all consumed in, almost like you're reading a book or watching a movie, and you feel for the characters and you want to be a part of it. And in turn, you create that environment through your assignments, the setup of your classroom, all that type of thing, in order to get the kids kind of fully engaged and fully immersed in it. And so one of the key factors to kind of defend this to people who worry about it is to remember that play has a very significant impact on the brain. And it's actually helps create new brain synapses and connections, which allow play to decrease the amount of information and times things have to be done in order to have them retained by, several 100% increase. And so in looking at all of this here, what you can see is there is just a ton of information, but I want to focus on motivation today. And that motivation piece that we're talking about is research done by Yu-Kai Chu in what's called actionable gamification, which is his book, and this model he created called Octalysis. And what this is the 8 core drivers of human motivation. And so when you understand these, and then something I'll show in just a moment of what are called the hexad player type created by Andrei Merjevsky, what you find out is there's kind of this recipe of 14 different things that you can apply in a classroom and mix and match them, just like making a recipe in the kitchen in order to create materials, contents, information for various types of learners to keep them engaged, all kind of working on the same task, but almost for different purposes. And so I'm going to kind of explore these really quickly here. So epic meaning and calling is the motivation that you're going to do something bigger than yourself. So it's going to be the idea that you can take something. And so, for example, you might play a video game where you save the world. And, of course, I'm not going to save the world, but in this video game scenario, I can be this hero and save the world. So it's creating a meaningful experience that creates this fantasy reality or this fictitious situation where kids can essentially become this thing that they couldn't become in real life. The next one is development and accomplishment, and this is your very simple RPG role-playing game mechanic where you progress upward. And this is actually what school is. If you think about it, we start at level 0 where we know nothing, and then school upgrades us level by level with content, which is like skill points, and we build ourselves up, and then we kind of go into the world in university to kind of pursue and explore things further. The next one is creativity and feedback. Many of us in education are obviously familiar with a student's absolute love and passion for Minecraft. And that's because it's a creativity and feedback based system. You create, you plan, design, and then someone looks at it, tells you they think it's great. You get motivated by that. And then you you look for feedback, you improve, all those types of things. It's kind of that collaborative effort. Then you have ownership and possession. So ownership and possession is just your general idea that when we own something, we obviously want to protect it and take care of it. And so, you want to collect game currency, you want to collect game cards, you want to, collect items, things like that. Then we have social influence and relatedness, which is the idea that we are driven by other people's opinions and decisions around us. And, sometimes we look at it from the perspective of, oh, other people don't control what I say or what I do. But it's kind of this underlying mechanic that sits in a lot of us where we look at it and we find it curious, why does this person do this? What does this person think of me? Or, oh, everybody's doing this, so I need to do this. And when you kind of rope all those things together, you kind of get this motivator at its core. Scarcity and impatience, pretty easy one to understand. If you kind of look around the room you're sitting in right now, you'll probably find an item that you purchased on impulse or that you bought because, there was a sale, there was a countdown timer, there was an item limit, someone else was looking at it and you picked it up first to buy it. It's the idea that we have this internal drive to to get what we want, and it's pushed when we believe that there are limitations or time constraints or things towards it. Then we have unpredictability and curiosity. So this is a core driver that's going to resolve around this is my favorite one to use in gamification. It's unpredictability. It's a way to even any scenario by giving a bunch of different results that could be random. And dice is a great way to use this in your classroom. And I'll kind of get to that in a second. But it's the idea that you don't exactly know what's going to happen. The proverbial Pandora's box. You don't know what's in there till you open it up. Next one we have is, and final one we have is loss and avoided. So this is a very basic human emotion and understanding. It's the idea that we don't want to lose people that we have in our lives or pets, or we don't want to lose things that we hold dear. So it's the idea that you will protect something using this basic kind of primal human emotions. And so if you take those 8 core drivers and you kind of sprinkle them around as ingredients, you can match them with something called the player type hexad, which is created by Andrei Marchevsky. And I always say his name wrong, and I always apologize. But he created something called the player type hexad. And this player type hexad is created in essence as the 6 ways that players or people um, play games and kind of function throughout life. And so if you take these, and I'm assuming our audience here is teachers, if I remember correctly, if you look at these 6 player types, you could immediately kind of picture these kids in your classroom. So you have the player who's learning for reward. They want prizes, they want currency, they want item cards, they want all that type of stuff. There's something that has to be given to them as a reward. um, the next one is kind of the philanthropist type, which is learning by teaching. So they love to help, they love to work with others, they love to interact with others. They have this whole mentality of wanting to be like a philanthropist. They want to help people in the classroom or around the school. Next, you have your free spirit, who's kind of self-guided. They're free form. They're the kids that kind of do the strange things in our classroom that kind of make you scratch your head. But when you look at it as a whole, they're kind of doing things in their own way, which is a really, really interesting way to. We judge those kids quickly in education and we worry about them. But I remember very distinctly, I had a student who didn't like sitting in chairs. He kind of would roll around on the ground. He kind of looked like he was totally lost when I was teaching and doing work. But he would absolutely ace most tests that I gave him because it was just kind of his thing. The chair, the desk, everything was kind of confining to him, and he needed kind of that freedom to move around. And that was just kind of his style. And when I stopped punishing him for that, I saw a lot of flourishing from him. Next, you have your achiever. This is one of the easiest recognizable kids in your classroom. This is the kid who does everything because they want to win, they want to learn, they're very driven internally to succeed. Then you have the socializer. We can easily picture this student. This is a student who loves talking, chatting with people, running around. Everything's got to be a group work, a group project, that type of thing. And then we have the disruptor. And this is the person who can cause some chaos in your classroom, both good and bad. And the idea is that these disruptors are really good at breaking things in your classroom, like rules, for example, but it allows you to, like a video game tester, beta test your game and find out where there are openings and cracks in the actual design. And I put them in the middle of this design. And the reason we put them in the middle here is because you can control kids like this by putting them in groups with these other types of players. So if you take a disruptor and you pair them with an achiever, the achiever doesn't let them disrupt. And so they tend to work a little bit better. But you put, 2, 3 disruptors in a group and all of a sudden chaos ensues. And so there are some questions you can ask yourself about these different player types that allow you to design things for your classroom. And so what I'm going to get to today is this activity that I created that you could do as a review game as early as tomorrow. And so it's a very simple principle of a game, but what it does is it reflects on these 6 different types of players, and again, these 8 different types of drivers. And I call it spellbound. And so the main principle of the game is very, very simple. What you do is you take trivia questions. So very basic review type questions. So here's some I did for just my sight and vision and optics unit here in Alberta. So what is a CCD? What is a pixel? How did we get there? And what I do is I print all of these questions out and I've put them face down on a table all over the room. And I give each question a number. So in this case, if you were to look through that whole sheet, you'll see that I have 37 of them. And each guild, so guild, I set my class up in teams. And that's what they call themselves, are guilds, because we're in the Renaissance. And what they do is they get this score sheet and they send a runner to the front of the room who collects one of these numbered sheets, brings it back to their table, and they answer the question. When they believe they've answered the question, they bring the numbered question sheet and this tracking sheet that you see on the screen to me. I quickly review their answer and I cross off and initial, or you could have a stamp or something to just denote so kids don't cheat, because here's where your disruptors come in. And what they do is the goal is to finish as many questions as possible. This is a pretty standard type of activity, kind of like a trivia race. Where it incorporates gamification is using the elements of these various game cards. And so today, I will put a link in the chat for those who are here right now, and then I'll get the link out for you guys to explore who are watching the replay of this video. But what I did was I looked at these motivators and these player types, and I created cards that are going to impact the strategy of the game. So what I did was pretty simple, but this is one of the most popular things that I do in my class. So the first thing we got to remember about gamification is theme is really important. And so while mine is kind of medieval Dungeons and Dragons, Game of Thrones era, I have magic and potions and things like that. You could categorize these in any type of gamification narrative that you want. So are you a spy? Are you in pirates, or whatever the case may be? And so what happens here is that you can look at these game cards and you can just recreate them. AI is an incredible thing now to be able to create these game cards. You just upload some graphics, ask it to study the design style, art style, theme, all that. And then you can ask it to create them in your own way. And so you can create game cards very, very quickly. But here's what I decided to do. The first thing I wanted to do was create something called like a freeze. So I called it Ice Ball. And a player who plays this card can freeze any player on any of the opposing teams. So typically my class has 5 teams going simultaneously for 2.5 minutes. So I have kind of a little area sectioned off in the front of the room with some stopwatches. And so if I were to play Ice Ball and it was me that got frozen, the player would be like, come up to me, say, I'm playing Ice Ball and I freeze Scott. So Scott would have to go to this little area, set the timer for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and he cannot participate. The second one is I wanted to cause mass chaos. And so that's Blast of Winter. This freezes an entire team for 30 seconds times the roll of a 6-sided dice. And so what this causes is absolute madness in the kids, because uses unpredictability and curiosity, and you bring a whole team up and you roll a dice. It can be 30 seconds by rolling a 1 all the way up to 3 minutes. And what you see is this absolute craziness of this area growing with kids who can't play, and the frustration and the excitement of wanting to come back into the game as they see other kids running around doing different things, and they kind of want to be a part of it. The next one is poison. So I said poison takes 3 players for 3 minutes out of the game, which is fairly straightforward. Then I started to create cards that gave you choice. And this is where strategy and the mechanics and the different player types start to kick in. Do you want to help people or do you want to attack? And so fire has the ability to do 2 things. It could be defensive. And so if you have players who are frozen and you want them back into the game, you can play the fire card in order to bring them back into the game, kind of negating the spell, right? As we tell the kids, it thaws them out and they can come back in. Or you can have them, now mine says calculating tool. I used to do this in math related content. So I would burn their calculator for 5 minutes. So they had to do kind of the mental and pen paper math. Which was, again, challenging for some of the kids, but a great mental exercise that kids really dive into when, there's an element of competition going through it. And so you can choose to use it offensively, which would be like your disruptor player type, or defensively, which would be like your philanthropist player type. Then you have Dragon Blood, and Dragon Blood heals. So anybody who is poisoned has the ability to be healed with Dragon Blood. And then I have lightning in a bottle, and lightning in a bottle forces teams to answer questions they've already answered again. And so let's say you're racing another team and they're at 15 answered questions and you're at 12. You can use lightning in a bottle to remove a question or two from their successful answer. So let's say they answered question 10 already. We can add question 10 back and they have to go up, get it again, answer it, submit it, kind of eating a little bit into their time. And so you take these 6 game cards and you print them out and you make sure that there are 6 per team. Meaning, so for me, I have 5 teams in my class times 6. So I would make 30 of these and I would print about 5 per card or 6. Yeah, 5 per card. But then I would shuffle them up into a pack and then I would randomly distribute them to the students. What this does is that's that unpredictability and curiosity component here, because now each team doesn't know what the other team has. So you might be attacking a team, but they have a lot of cards to counteract what you have. And you have the ability, of course, to heal other teams or to unthaw other teams. So you can use your cards in the form of an ally. And then that's when you start to get to social influence and relatedness and scarcity and impatience. I only have one. Do I use it to help somebody who I hope will help me? Or do I use it to attack somebody? Or when do I use it? Do I use it early or do I save them for the end when the game really starts to get to crunch time? And then you kind of get into that ownership and possession. I always have kids who don't want to play the cards because they think that they're beneficial to hold on to them, but they're a one-time use for that game. And then you get that creativity and that feedback. You see people playing things in interesting ways and strategies, and then the players kind of talking to each other determine what's strong and what's not strong. So your disruptors are trying to attack people. Your achievers are strategizing and ways to use them the best that they can. Your philanthropists want to protect and help people. Your socializers are leading discussions about how to best do it. And this game just kind of takes the like I said earlier, the very simple concept of just basic trivia tied with a number and turns it into this ultra competitive but really cross-curricular thing, because you get negotiation, you get collaboration, you get creative thinking and critical thinking, and then you get just your general content knowledge of whatever subject matter that you're teaching. And so I call this spellbound. And so what I will do right now is I will grab a link for this and you can take this. More or less these 2 things will be the most, but this will kind of show you again what my questions look like. And so I will post that in the chat of this if I can find it, which looks to be right
Thank you
here.
so much.
And so we'll plop that in right there. And then before I get going, if you're really interested in gamification, what I've been working on is a very unique professional development opportunity for teachers. And I guess really anyone who's interested in motivating, because while it's written in the idea of teaching, it can be used across any platform to motivate people, because these motivators I taught you very, very briefly are not exactly exclusive to kids. They're human motivation and they're human reasons we do things. And so you could use this if you were in marketing and business, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to kind of cater this towards education because that's my niche. And so what we have here is this virtual world that I'm building step by step, where you assume the role of this character who is meeting me, Master Hebes, which is my game name in my classroom. And I am guiding you along this journey. Everything has been written by me step by step in a fully gamified format to teach you what gamification is. And you work your way through these different worlds. They contain challenges, puzzles, they riddles, interactive games, all that type of stuff. And what it does is it teaches you what gamification is step by step. It has videos, it has templates. It has a bunch of stuff because I've created this thing called the loot chest, where I am very slowly but surely writing and adding every resource I've created over the last 10 years, which represents over probably at this point 2,000 plus hours of trial error, trying things, working out the details, interviewing kids to see what works, what doesn't work. And I'm slowly releasing it bit by bit. But I will have everything I've ever created here coupled with this step-by-step process. So when I talked about the ways that humans are motivated, that would be this here. And it's quite an extensive module. And then when I talked about what is gamification, well, there's kind of a module here about it. And then, the player types we were talking about, that was the very big model that I was just explaining here. And so all of it is explained in a sequential narrative of this person meeting me, and I'm kind of guiding them around this world. And so it shows you what a gamified course looks like and what a gamified course feels like. So if you choose to design your own, what you'll totally have access to is a complete template of what it looks and feels like from the student experience, which will help you design it from the educator's experience. So what I'll do is I will put a link to this also in our chat. And then if Natasha, you can share those out in the however you see fit to the community for those who could not make it in
Of
person, that would
course.
be great. And so
Of
that's
course.
just great. Thank you. And so that's just, a little quick snippet crash course about how you can use gamification in your classroom, as early as tomorrow, realistically. um, you look at the different components that motivate us, and then you look at the different reasons they are motivating to us. And then you can kind of, like I said, much like a cook in a kitchen with various ingredients, you can mix those motivators and those player types together to create quick, impactful lessons, activities. And again, in this platform here and using just kind of some of these tools, you can bring them to life in your classroom. And anybody who chooses to also potentially explore or join this platform, my goal is that in this community tab, we have oops, this has only been released for, a couple of weeks now. It's the idea of it will become a communal hub for gamification as well. So ideally, these chats will be full of different members communicating with each other, sharing ideas and bouncing content off of each other, so that it's not just a learning platform, but it's also a collaborative community for people all over the world interested in gamification, specifically in education. And so I'm not sure if anybody has excuse me, I have the hiccups, has a
Ah,
question or two for anything. But if
um,
there is
I
one,
do
I'd be
have
happy to.
I do have a couple of questions. So you can now stop sharing your
Sure.
screen. Um, First of all, thank you very much for taking us through this journey on defining what is human motivation and reality. I think that was super interesting, and I really enjoyed the game. I can see why that would bring so much enthusiasm in classrooms. Two very quick practical questions. Any
Mhm.
challenges you face while playing the game? First of all, anything we should keep in mind for relationships, teams, timing?
Yeah, no, that's a
Um,
great question. So the first thing you want to do is you want to use that scarcity and impatience, and you want to have a game clock on your front screen, projector, whatever the case may be, because you want kids to see the time decreasing, which forces the ability for decision making. The second thing is, depending on your class, you may have to include rules of not attacking the same person or same team with two or more cards in a row, because obviously kids in their own mind will create this hierarchy of who's the smartest, quote unquote, and who's the weakest. So they'll keep attacking the quote unquote smart kids. So you can create rules that, a player cannot have, more than one card played against them in a set time period or in a set order or whatever the case may be. And then it's just about watching and listening. Some kids will get competitive and sometimes they say wild things, and it's just about having the ability to punish. So you can add kind of a secret game card that's for you. You could call it, maybe not death, but something to the effect where you have the ability as the game creator to kick a player out who's crossing a line for a set period of time, more or less creating consequence to action. And so those are kind of the three areas that I find very um, mindful about in design. But again, sometimes some classes are more, eager and you need to have more restrictions, and some kind of focus in more on the game and the strategy. And so um, they don't need quite those specifics. But again, it's those are three areas to kind of look out for.
Okay. And last question, are they ever fed up with the games? Is there a
No,
danger of over using gamification in classrooms?
no, because like I was explaining earlier, gamification is not like do a game and learn a skill. It's the immersion of the whole thing. So what
Mm.
I wasn't able to kind of share in this, and that's kind of why I've created this online PD course, is that gamification as a whole is a year-long piece. And so you slowly release components to it as you would. So much like if you were to play kind of an RPG game, you don't get access to level the final boss battle or the best armor or whatever on day one. You have to earn it. And so some cards are slowly released, some game mechanics are slowly released. I would play this game maybe once every couple months, and in between use different types of games that you may have created, again, big or small. And so there's a lot of different layers to it. But I guess the biggest take home message is that there's two things: there's gamification and there's game based learning. And gamification is an immersive, all encompassing experience with narrative, character, story, the whole bit. And game based learning is play said game to learn said skill.
Thank you very much for these definitions and the distinction. I think this was super useful to understand exactly what we are speaking about. So we are reaching the end of another session of learning bites. Scott, we couldn't be more grateful for your input, for your efforts, and for bringing your ideas to us this afternoon for us, morning for you.
Yeah.
We will make sure to share the resources with the community and with the people who registered for this workshop, but maybe are not here right now. I think it is extremely important to shed lights on methodologies like gamification. And thank you very much for the deep the deep dive in the methodology and the approach. Uh, we
Of
will make
course.
sure
Well,
to share
yeah,
the
thank you for having
links,
me.
and we will keep a close eye on the platform and support it as it grows. Thank you very much for everything. Um, see you all in the next one. Bye.
Thank you.